welcome to today's class. So today we'll be looking at the introduction to physics. So we'll be able to understand the meaning of physics. That is for the beginners and the form ones. So you'll be able to understand what is physics, and then also you'll be able to understand the scope of physics. So first of all, to begin with, physics is a study of matter and its relation to energy. So physics is a study of matter and its relation to energy. So in primary science, you realize that there were so many topics that you were able to cover in science, but now you realize in high school there are 3 subdivisions, that is physics, chemistry, and biology. And we are saying now, when it comes to physics, our focus is only things to do with matter and also energy. And that means the topics we'll be covering on will be lying on those areas. It's important to understand that when it comes to the scope, what you'll be able to understand in physics, or the scope of what we'll be covering. First of all, number 1, we'll be able to understand the occurrence of lightning. You'll be able to understand the phenomenon of occurrence of lightning. Number 2, we have occurrence of rainbows. So you'll be able to understand how rainbows occurs. We have occurrence of marriages. And when we are talking of marriages, we are simply saying, sometimes you may see when it is very hot during the day, and then you look very far in a flat tarmac, you realize that you see like a pool of water. And also in a desert area, when it is very hot, and then you look very far away, you realize that you see something like a pool of water. So that's what we are calling the mirage. So be able to understand the occurrence of mirage, occurrence of eclipses. We'll also be able to understand why the objects fall towards the earth. When you drop any object, you realize that it falls towards the center of the earth. So be able to understand why. We'll also be able to understand the occurrence of ocean tides and waves. How does the ocean tides and wave occur? We'll also be able to understand the formation of shadows, how the shadows occur, the formation of convection or rainfall. We'll be able to understand various phenomenon. In other words, you are saying in physics, these are some of the things that we'll be understanding. We have the twinkling of the stars, and how light is produced, how light moves, how heat moves in various mediums. So in other words, we'll be focusing on a lot of things, and mostly touching on energy. And when we are talking of energy, we also are including force. So anything that includes force and motion, that is anything to do with motion and force. We have waves like sound and all that. So that is the scope of physics, and that means mostly in physics we'll not be dealing with plants and animals. Neither will we be dealing with chemicals, but our focus is on energy and matter. And that's why we are saying physics is the study of matter and its relation to energy. So that's the definition of physics. It's a very simple definition. We are saying that physics is a study of matter and its relation to energy. And it's important to note that in science, we normally say matter is anything that occupies space and has mass. So what are the branches of physics? So we can now look at the branches of physics. And one of the branches is mechanics. Number 1, we have mechanics. And mechanics is the study of motion of bodies under the influence of force. So that means in mechanics, we'll be dealing with the motion of bodies and also the force that is making these bodies move. So we'll be looking at the motion of bodies under the influence of force. Remember, motions are mostly caused by force, although sometimes they can also be caused by a pressure difference. For example, when you are sucking a liquid through a drinking straw. But mostly motion is caused by force. So be understanding the motion of bodies under the influence of force in that branch is called mechanics. And it's also important to note that we have kinematics. Kinematics is a branch of mechanics, but in kinematics we only deal with motion of bodies but ignoring the force. So there's a difference between kinematics and dynamics. Kinematics and dynamics. So in kinematics, we only focus on motion of bodies, but we are ignoring what is making the bodies move. So in other words, kinematics is the branch of physics dealing with study of motion of bodies. But when we are talking of dynamics, we are talking of motion of bodies under the influence of force, which is we are also calling mechanics. So that is the first branch, mechanics. Number 2, electricity and magnetism, the second branch of physics. So in electricity and magnetism, we deal with electric current and magnetic fields, and also their relationship, the relationship between electric fields and magnetic fields, and also their extensive applications. For example, we have the speakers. You know, a speaker is a device that converts electric current to sound. So we have a microphone that converts we have an interaction, we have coils and magnetic field, and then electricity is induced through electromagnetic induction. So we have a lot of applications. We have so many applications, and ranging from microphones, loudspeakers, and electric bells, and so many other things that we'll be looking at. We are saying in electricity and magnetism, we simply focus on the relationship between electric fields and also magnetic fields, or electricity and magnetism, and also their extensive applications in real life. Number 3, we have thermodynamics, another branch of physics, thermodynamics. And then thermodynamics, thermo means heat. So when you're talking of thermodynamics, you're simply referring to study of transformation of heat from other forms of energy and to other forms of energy. So thermodynamics is the study of transformation of heat to other forms of energy and also from other forms of energy. We have another branch known as geometrical optics or optics. So when you're talking of geometrical optics, we are referring to study of propagation of light through various mediums. Propagation of light. Light is very extensive, because we have reflection of light, interference in light, and so many other things which we need to understand. So we are saying when we are in this branch known as geometrical optics, we are dealing with light, the study of light, and how it propagates through various mediums, or how it moves through various mediums. Then we have waves, another branch of physics, and this is the propagation of energy through space. So we'll be dealing with how energy is propagated through space. And energy, in other words, there are many forms of energy which we'll be focusing on in that area. And also, a wave can simply be called defined as the transmission of disturbance. Transmission of a disturbance. For example, when you strike the water with a rod, you realize that a wave is formed. That means that disturbance you have caused there is propagated through that medium. So we are saying in that branch we'll be dealing with the propagation of energy through various mediums or a wave. Then lastly, we have atomic physics. So in atomic physics, we'll be dealing with particles that are constituting the nucleus of an atom, and also the energy changes, the accompanying energy changes. We have an atom and the nucleus of an atom. So the particles that are accompanying that nucleus, or the forces, and the particles allow the nucleus and also the forces involved and the energy. So that's what we'll be focusing on. That is particles surrounding the nucleus and the accompanying energy changes. That means in that area we'll be focusing on a lot of things. For example, we have energy that is generated from those kind of reactions known as radioactivity and other radioactive atoms or radioactivity. So we'll be looking at various things in that part. So, and then before we finalize the introductory part of physics, it's also important to understand how is physics related to the other subjects. For example, how is physics related to mathematics? So you realize that in physics, the formulas we use, and the skills, multiplication skills, we have division skills, subtraction skills. All these skills we borrow from mathematics. So that means in physics we borrow a lot of skills and formulae from mathematics, which we apply also in physics. Then we have physics and history. How is physics and history related? So you realize that in physics we study radioactivity, and then we have radioactive decay and calculation of radioactivity and the carbon dating. And then in history you realize that they borrow that knowledge of radioactivity in physics to calculate when they want to know to date their fossils. So when the historians are dating the fossils, they borrow the knowledge of physicists from radioactivity to be able to date these fossils. Then we have physics and home science. You realize that in the kitchen we have a lot of appliances. We have microwaves, we have fridges, electric heaters. All these components, they are mostly relying on electric current, which is a component of physics, because in physics we study electric current and also calculation of electric current, costing of electricity, resistance and all that. So you realize that to operate these gadgets, these electrical gadgets used in the kitchen, you need to have a physics background. So we are saying even to repair these instruments and also to use them, you require some physics background. So that means the two are related. We have physics and biology. So in physics we study magnification. We study magnification and also we calculate magnification. And then you realize that in biology, when they want to know how a cell has been magnified, they mostly rely on physics formulae. They borrow the formulas from physics on calculation of magnification in order to calculate the magnification of a cell. And as well, it's important to note that biologists, when they are making up a microscope, they rely on lenses. And we say lenses are normally studied in physics. Actually, we have a topic called thin lenses, where we study things to do with the lenses and how they propagate the light and how they form images, magnification of the images and all that. So you realize that when the microscopes are made from physics knowledge of thin lenses, and then you also realize that they are used in biology when they are studying the cells. Then we have physics and chemistry. So in physics we study the atoms and also the particles which are in the components of the atom, the particles that are constituting the atoms and also the nucleus. And we also study the forces between the protons and the electrons, the nuclear force and all that. So you realize that these forces within the atom is what determines the reactivity of the atom, and in other ones the reactivity of the general element which has been made up of those atoms. So you realize that in physics, the study of atoms and the accompanying energy changes within the atom, and also the forces within the atoms is borrowed in chemistry, when they want to know how reactive an element would be or how reactive an element can be. So that's all about physics and various subjects, how they are related. Maybe to finish up on that, we can also mention something on religion, that is CRE. You realize that in CRE they study the orderliness, the creation, 24 hours in a day and night, 12 hours in a day, 12 hours in a night, the rotation of the earth and all that. And we are saying in physics, when we study the forces, and also, for example, we have the gravitational force, and also when we are studying our studies in physics relating to the matters of creation, we normally concur with the religious people. In other words, our studies are always in agreement. For example, when we are explaining the formation of convection or rainfall, when we are explaining how the earth rotates, and how the earth revolves around the earth and the sun, and also the forces involved. When we are explaining how heat from the sun reaches the earth, So we understand that our studies or our arguments are always in agreement with what the religious people say, and in other ones there is a lot of correlation because our studies are always in agreement, and even our theories are always in agreement. For example, we say when you drop things, they fall towards the center of the earth. That means all those things are created like that. And in other ones, we are saying there's a lot of correlation between physics and all the subjects, and that means but you should be able to distinguish how physics the scope of physics is compared to other subjects. In other words, when you're explaining these concepts, you should be able to understand how far do we go in terms of explaining these concepts. And also generally the scope also explains the topics we'll be covering in physics from Form 1 up to Form 4. Remember, physics is 10 topics in Form 1, 10 in Form 2, 10 in Form 3, and 11 in Form 4. There's a total of 41 topics. And also in physics, we have practicals in laboratory. That means physics being a science, there's a lot of things you need to understand, although it's also important to note that physics is a mathematical science, and that means you should have at least a passion for some mathematical skills and formulae. You should have that passion to calculate, because in physics you also do a lot of calculation, borrowing mathematical formulae and skills. So we are saying physics is generally a science that focuses on matter, all forms of matter, and also the energy and forces. And that means that's all we'll be covering in physics from Form 1 up to Form 4. And also lastly, physics has 3 papers. We have paper 1 dealing with the mechanics mostly. That is forces and motion. We have paper 2 dealing with electricity and magnetism and waves. And then we have paper 3, that's a practical. So that means that is generally the introductory part of physics. But in further interactions, you'll be able to understand more on these concepts. So stay tuned and also follow our channel, the e-learning classroom, so that you can get subsequent updates in all physics fields. So that marks the end of that session. Wish you a good day.